David Jacob. The David Jacobs memorial trolley has just come through. What is our drink of the day?
Well, I thought, why not go for an old-fashioned today?
What's one of those?
Bourbon or whiskey, sugar syrup, and a dash of bitters over ice. Very tasty. Okay. Very strong.
Matt's pulled a face, so it's not for him, but it sounds very tasty.
Sounds very lovely.
It's lovely.
Today's confession comes from Nigel. Nigel, thank you very much indeed. And gets us
Lots of Nigels.
Lots of Nigels.
Yeah.
Simon and crew, before I confess, I must ask you to keep my name a secret, as the person who's the subject of my misdemeanour still has no clue as to why or what happened to him on that August bank holiday back in 1982. So as I said, I'm going to take you back 40 years to the heady days of August 82. Either Tiger was at number one, Spurs had won the FA Cup. It's that long ago.
Yeah.
My local pub was a hive of activity on the afternoon of the Friday before the bank holiday, with myself and lots of my mates enjoying a well-earned day off before the long weekend shenanigans. I was a 21-year-old with my like-minded group of friends who liked to wind up another group of lads who were also regulars at our local but were about 5 years older than us. This group had an unofficial leader called Frank, not his real name, who was the man who made the decisions as to what match they would go to and where they would cause trouble, and had an unhealthy appetite for Strongbow cider.
Okay.
The picture is painted. Frank was about 6'3", built like a rather sturdy outside public convenience. He was actually a really nice bloke once you got to know him.
Yeah.
This particular Friday before the bank holiday, myself and one of our group came up with the suggestion that we should all go to Margate for the weekend. Everyone seemed to be very enthusiastic, and we all began planning how we would get there and where we would stay. After a long discussion lasting about 10 minutes, it was decided that I would hire a minibus and Mark, also not his real name, would drive, as he didn't drink, and he would go for free as the driver. However, a count-up of all the interested parties, which included some of Frank's group, it was decided that we would need 2 minibuses to accommodate our weekend excursion. Saturday morning, 10 a.m, the crowd started to appear around our pub with sports bags and trays of cheap corner shop lager for the long trip to Margate. 10:30 arrived. With a riotous chorus of Chas and Dave's Down a Margate song, we were on our way. Well, the weekend went well, and Margate certainly knew we were there. I think that sentence is working very hard. Yeah. On the Monday, it was time to head home. We started rounding up stragglers, which was pretty difficult, as there were 2 minibuses and no one really knew who was on which minibus. Still, we managed to collect everyone we thought, and we headed off back home. As we were driving along the seafront, shouting out our thank yous and goodbyes to the nice people of Margate, I'm sure you were so popular, I noticed a familiar figure sitting on the curb about 100 yards up the road from us, nursing 4 cans of Strongbow and looking rather the worse for wear. Or can I say, always drink responsibly?
Obviously,
Of course.
Yeah.
Mark, stop the bus. That's Frank sat in the road up there. They forgot him on the other bus. We better pick him up or we'll be in it when we get back. We all knew what it was like. It's not a good idea to get on the wrong side of Frank. So Mark stopped the bus and we piled Frank onto the bus with his cider. He seemed to wake up a little bit once we got going and the football song started. Frank joined in with the merriment and drank his cider, and then proceeded to help us drink our lager as well. About halfway home, Frank fell asleep and slept the rest of the way along with most of the rest of the passengers. We arrived back at about 9 p.m. Mark was good enough to drop everyone at their houses, which is a nice thing. When we got to Frank's house, it was in darkness, with his wife and kids clearly tucked up in bed. Frank's wife, Sarah, was of the same disposition as Frank. No one argued with her. She even had been known to give Frank a slap if he misbehaved around her. So we decided that stealth was the best option. It took 5 of us to move the big lump to his front door. I fished around inside Frank's pocket for some keys, but didn't find anything. Gingerly, I rang the doorbell and thought about what I was going to say to Sarah. No answer. We tried waking Frank, but we got nowhere. I rang the doorbell again, nothing. Then Frank suddenly found his second wind and started shouting something incoherently, then went on to his rendition of Oz's Dream. Spurs song of the moment.
Yes, yeah.
Me and the 4 lads with me tried to shush him, to no avail, and then I'm afraid it happened. Frank fell over onto the grass in front of his house, ending up lying next to a small wall that separated Frank's front garden from his neighbour's, just as his next-door neighbour came out, shouting, "What's all the noise out here?" "I'm sorry, we're trying to get Sarah to open the door," I said. "It's important, I think she must be in bed." Neighbour says, "Well, you'll have a hard time getting an answer tonight. She's gone to Margate with Frank and the kids for the week." And won't be home till Friday. Well, at this point, my life flashed before my eyes, looking at Frank lying on the grass, fast asleep again, and hidden from the next-door neighbour by the wall between the gardens. I ushered my 4 accomplices back to the van and ordered Mark to make a hasty retreat. Frank is still with Sarah, and they both still frequent the same pub. Most of the old regulars have moved away, but the day Frank disappeared in Margate and was found in his front garden 120 miles away is the stuff of legend, and many speculative discussions have been made in the pub. Simon, I seek forgiveness not from Frank, as to this day he has no idea how he ended up back at home when he travelled to Margate only the day before for a family week away. Nor do I seek forgiveness from Sarah, as she, if she were to find out that I was the reason that Frank went AWOL in August 82, my fate would be worse than if Frank found out. But I seek forgiveness from Mark, not his real name, and my 4 friends for making them vow to keep this whole unfortunate event secret from everyone and forever. Okay, well, Nigel, thank you. An unexpected twist in the penultimate paragraph. Sister Susie, what do you make of this story?
Well, Nigel, wow, that's all I can say, really. I hear that you were, only trying to help. You didn't want to leave him there, but what you should have had is, surely you should have known who was going on the trip. You should have had a list of names, who was on bus 1 and who was on bus 2, and then you would have known that Frank was there with his family and not with you guys, and for that, I can't forgive you.
Brother from another gutter.
Who has a list? Who goes on these things with a list? Superb, Suze. You can come on mine, yes. I had no idea how that was going to go. Absolutely file that under what are the chances of that happening. And trips to Margate. Loved the trips to Margate until that arty lot all got in, and it's completely changed. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Margate. Definitely forgiving.
You're definitely forgiving, okay, yeah. Because you quite like Margate the way it used to be. All right, yeah. Okay. People's verdict, please. Do you forgive Nigel? Yes or no? 61054. First word is Simon. Nigel sent in today's confession about a trip to Margate, which, it was a trip to Margate. And Frank wasn't supposed to be on their trip to Margate, but they took him back anyway. Nigel gets the smart speaker, but what does the nation say to Nigel?
So the canons say forgiven. Simon, we love this confession. Nigel was trying to do the right thing. It's all Frank's fault. Why was he alone and drunk and not with his family that night if they were on holiday together? Ian the cabbie says forgiven. It's the law. You never go home on the boat, on the coach you go in on a Beano. Crying, right? Laughing emoji. Make a list. Crying, laughing emoji. Stop it. Crying, laughing emoji. And Paul says forgiven, if only to remind me to watch the episode of Auf Wiedersehen, Pet, when somebody put a drunk Oz on a plane to Newcastle, even though he was working in Germany.
It's that kind of thing, and if that's sparked a thought in your mind, maybe you have a confession for us we can swap for a smart speaker. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And there's no prize, and we'll obviously change all the names as much as you wish anyway. Let's go live to the best pub in the UK, in the Saloon Bar, where Sister Susie is waiting with her drinks trolley, I think. There it comes.
Oh, there it is.
So what are you picking for us today, Sister Susie?
Well, I thought we could try a Tom Collins today, which is, if you like a gin and tonic but fancy a different take on it, then it's a gin, lemon juice, sugar syrup and soda water instead of tonic, served in a very tall glass.
Okay, well, we'll have a few of those. I might just stick to fizzy water for the moment, but a Tom Collins for us later. Matt looks very unimpressed, by the way. So, which is no change there.
No change at all.
Today's confession comes from Carrie, Simon and the team. So, from Carrie, full stop. Simon and the team, new paragraph. I'd like to share a confession. By the way, there's a lot of bad behaviour in this confession, as there tends to be, but, just a warning.
So don't do it at home.
I'd like to share a confession with you and ask for forgiveness. It's a secret I've been hiding since 1975 and need to cleanse my soul. As an adult with children of my own, as well as working in a local college, I need to present myself as a pillar of society and not have this stain forever being a burden on my shoulders. Not sure a stain can be a burden on a shoulder, but, I get what you're talking about. I'm seeking forgiveness from my dad and sister for an incident back in the autumn term of 1975. I was in secondary school. Before I begin my tale, I'd like to say this. In hindsight, it was a really bad idea and one not to be repeated under any circumstances.
Okay.
And you'll notice as we get to some crucial bits, I have changed some crucial information.
This is really building it up. I'm looking forward to this.
Chemistry
Oh, that's why. Chemistry, right?
wasn't a subject I was particularly enjoying, but our teacher showed us how to mix chemicals and make flares. Not flares as in trousers, but the flares that shoot into the air.
Yeah, okay.
To be fair, he made the flares in the fume cupboard, as you would, but
Yeah.
my ears pricked up and my eyes were delighted by the sounds made and the bright colours. Even better when he said the chemicals could be bought from any local chemists.
Wow.
Now, please be aware, says Kerry, this is no longer possible. But I'm talking about those oh-so-innocent days 47 years ago when life was so much simpler and you could buy dangerous stuff
Yeah.
from the chemist. Fast forward to Saturday morning and I visit my local chemist, sweaty palms clutching a handful of coins, my pocket money. My voice cracked nervously as I managed to stammer out, "A bottle of what we are calling secret crystals, please." And a box of what we're calling and the other stuff as well. The chemist frowned at me. I held out my shaking hand to show him my coins. "Ah," he said, "you're going to dye paper?" He's from
What? Is he in a Bond movie? Brilliant.
I don't know.
Mr. Bond.
You're going to dye paper. As in dye, D-Y-E,
Yes,
obviously.
of course.
Yes, I responded, eagerly clutching onto the realization that I might be just about getting what I needed. And I did. Stashing my purchases under my bed, I could hardly sleep with excitement that night. The thought of making my own flares was thrilling. I would say this next paragraph contains more bad ideas than any other paragraph ever. Sunday morning came, says, what are we calling her? Carrie, that's right.
Yeah.
Sunday morning came and it was chilly. I let myself into Dad's shed. Recalling what I needed, I borrowed what we're calling a vital fluid from my mum's baking kit, which, according to Mr. person who told me about chemistry, flowed slowly and blended the dry chemicals. I couldn't find a suitable container, but Mum had spare jars for her jam making, so I snaffled one of those. Then, incredibly, I also thought it would be a good idea to see how far the sparks on the flare flew through the air, so I removed the ball bearings from my sister's bike and added them to the dry mixture.
Okay, no, that's a bad idea.
Placing everything on the floor of the shed, I put the dry ingredients in the jar, then added the fluid. The chemicals started to fizz. At that point, I panicked and legged it out of the shed, slammed the door, and hid behind the dustbin. A few minutes later, there was a loud crack sound and smoke billowed around the edges of the shed door. I left it for about half an hour before opening the door and checked out what had happened. Embedded in the wooden shed walls were bits of glass, a darkened spot on the shed floor where the ball bearings had gone. I had no idea. They were nowhere to be seen. I picked out the glass and wrapped everything in newspaper before disposing of the evidence in the dustbin. Back inside the house for what remained of the weekend, I waited to be found out, but nothing was said. The days and weeks passed and still nothing. Result: no one knew. It wasn't something I'd repeat once I realised the possible consequences of my actions, and the incident was soon forgotten as I had more important things on my mind, like boys, new tank tops, and whether I could get away with platform shoes at school. Spring came and my sister decided to use her bike, but for some reason it wasn't working. Wandering back home from school one summer afternoon, bags swinging and not a care in the world, as I got to the garden, the scent of wood smoke was strong in the air. Opening the door to the kitchen, Mum was there preparing dinner. "Get changed," she said. "You can then take a beer out to your dad in the garden. He's not in the best of moods." Out I went, glass in hand, to find my dad standing next to a bonfire that looked suspiciously like the remains of the shed. Handing him his glass, I said, "So, what's up?" "I went to get the mower from the shed," said my dad, taking a long swig of beer, "and the sun was streaming through little holes in the walls." My heart sank as the realization of what this might mean for me. I stalled for time. "Oh, yes," I replied, trying desperately not to sound or look too guilty. "Yeah," he replied, "woodworm. I had to pull it all down and burn it. 45 quid it cost me to buy a new shed. 45 blooming quid! Can you believe it? Price of sheds today." 45 quid, I said. I let my head drop and shook it slowly from side to side in commiseration, but the reality was I was trying to hide the smile and relief because I'd got away with it. I've made up for the 45 quid several times over, as when myself and my husband visit him for our Friday night game of dominoes, I take him a bottle of his favourite tipple, but every now and again he mentions the shed and how much it cost him. 45 quid! He still has the shed today, painted dozens of times over, and not a woodworm hole to be seen. If you could find it in your hearts to forgive a rather wayward teenager who's tried to follow a better path as a responsible adult, it would be a huge relief. Or am I doomed to damnation for all eternity? Says Carrie, slightly over-egging the pudding at
I
the
think
end.
she did, yeah.
Sister Susie, obviously the voice of responsibility.
Well, Carrie, you should never do anything like this without consulting. And I know you're going to say I'm really boring here, but without consulting a responsible adult. You know, you can have fun with chemistry, but you can't do it on your own. Also, in a confined space like a shed.
Lunacy.
Oh, absolutely ridiculous. So I can't forgive you, I'm afraid. Totally irresponsible.
Brother from another gutter.
I mean, is it just me? I mean, the
Yes.
experiments, isn't this what experimentation is all about? Is doing stuff and sometimes it goes wrong. I think that's probably it's what made this country great, is being able to sometimes experiment and then realise it was a massive mistake and not do it again. Also, do ball bearings look like woodworm? No, they don't. So really, Dad should have worked
Dad's
that
fault.
out. It's Dad's fault for not realising that woodworm don't look like ball bearings, and also he's now maintaining the shed even better than before. So everyone wins. So definitely forgiven.
People's verdict, please. Do you forgive Carrie, yes or no? On the text 61054. First word is Simon. Just before the news, Carrie sent in her chemistry-based confession where she was inspired by her chemistry teacher, but basically blew up her dad's shed.
Yeah.
Over a long period of time. I mean, come on, Carrie. What were you thinking? Carrie doesn't live here anymore. Anyway, people's verdict is in. What do you think?
So forgiven, says Diane in Devon. They teach us science and then complain when we experiment. To be honest, what was going to happen? Catherine says not forgiven. They should have at least done it in an open space. Where do they think the flow was going? In a shed? Clearly it would have created a hole in the roof either way. And Mike says forgiven. I agree with Matt. Surely the dad should have known what woodworm actually looked like. And 45 quid for a shed is pretty cheap in my opinion.
No, yeah, back in the day.
Yeah.
But, and 1975 being the day. But
That
that might
was.
have been just mighty woodworm.
Yes, it might have been that, but it probably
But
wasn't.
it probably wasn't. Anyway, if you have a confession maybe inspired by that one, we would love to see it. And then Carrie gets the smart speaker for today. If you fancy one, send us a confession. 2, confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. A confession on the way, and don't forget you've probably got a couple of confessions which you haven't signed up to. And if that seems to make sense to you, well, what you need to do, get your confession into me, and if we like it and we use it, you get a smart speaker, which seems like a pretty good thing. Pretty good deal. Let's go live to the saloon bar of the world's greatest pub, run by Sister Susie. Just checking in. We're loud and clear in the bar there.
You are indeed.
Okay, and I'm just checking the
The drinks trolley.
David Jacobs Memorial Drinks
it is.
Trolley
Yeah.
is here. What are we serving today?
Well, I thought as the nights are getting a bit darker, how about a glass of Argentinian Malbec would be quite nice.
Is that good?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
delicious.
Excellent. I'll have half a pint. Thank you very much. Always drink responsibly. Now,
Obviously.
what do we have here? We have a confession from Robbie. Dear Simon and your ever-forgiving collective, my confession takes us back to a dark, damp Thursday night in Stoke-on-Trent. It was a glamorous start. In late October 1999. It's Halloween. Our local pub, The Station, had for many years been a welcoming heart of the community and a real focal point. However, at this time, the place had become, as they say, very tired and in a somewhat sad state. A lady from Ireland named Cara was brought in by the brewery to try and get the pub back into shape like it used to be in those heady beer-soaked days of the 70s and 80s. Cara was a deeply religious, feisty Irish lady who stood no lip from the locals. And to be honest, she had better tattoos than most of the men in there.
Right.
You get the picture.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Initially, the pub was a popular place again. Faces old and new came back through the door. I had taken a part-time job there, 4 nights a week, helping behind the bar. And with the upcoming Millennium celebrations, they were being discussed by the locals. And things were certainly on the up for this once great pub. However, as I mentioned earlier, Cara was most certainly an honest and, let's say, opinionated lady who had certainly ruffled a few of the locals' feathers. So they had big plans for the upcoming Halloween Scarefest, just a few days away. She had very dismissive views on all things Halloween, and also by now she was starting to miss the Emerald Isle and home. She didn't want to make any real effort for what she called the silly ghost and witches thing. You can imagine that would be...
Yes.
Anyway, I had tried, says Robbie, over the past few weeks to keep her on board. However, I had been introducing such revolutionary ideas as free pool and free jukebox, and I managed to convince her to even book a Halloween disco. On the Wednesday leading up to Halloween, a day like today, it had been a really quiet evening. Cara had spent the evening upstairs, came down just after 11 to lock up and check that everything was okay. We said our farewells. As I mentioned earlier in my confession, the pub was a shadow of its former self. In certain areas were rather spooky and off-limits to customers, but still had to be made secure. I continued to clean ashtrays and replace beer mats, those were the days, as I heard Cara chuntering around what I can only describe as a strongly worded Gaelic prayer. She went through to the back bar, which was a dingy room with hardly any lighting, full of cobwebs, creaky floorboards. She was just checking the dodgy fire doors there. I just happened to be walking past the free jukebox, and I peered down the tracks. Knowing her feelings on Halloween, my eyes inadvertently focused on track E7 as I pressed the keys to play the track. I waited for the many speakers still connected around the desolate old pub to blast out. The disc settled on the turntable. Cara continued to pray next door. The playing arm settled on the record. The jukebox made that arm on the record sound that we love so much. Fran was now onto her Hail Marys. The first groove hit the needle, and the jukebox speakers burst into life.
I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you fire.
Obviously, the crazy world of Arthur Brown. Well, the screaming from that dingy room was heard for miles, and Cara flew into view, ran furiously behind the bar, disappeared up the stairs, slamming the door. She didn't notice me. She was using words even a poor lad from Stoke had never heard, and that's saying something. Cara actually left the next day and was never heard of again. Tragic ending. Father Simon, please, can I ask for forgiveness from not just Cara, who probably spent the next few years telling people about this dirty, haunted pub in the Potteries, but also to the local community. You see, they were without a pub for the planned Halloween and Millennium celebrations. Didn't happen. The pub was never opened again, and it stood derelict for years and was sadly knocked down in 2019.
Oh dear.
And this, I believe, was the beginning of the end, says Robbie. Now, I'm suspecting that Sister Susie may well take quite a hard line on this, because it means the end of a pub due to his recklessness, just because he wanted to play the crazy world of Arthur Brown. Sister Susie.
Yeah, exactly, Robbie. I just think if that was the beginning of the end, then I just can't forgive you, because if you brought that pub down and it's now closed, never to be open again, think of all the people that were really excited about that Halloween disco that
Yes.
you'd arranged. Or the Millennium Party. I'm sorry, Robbie, can't forgive you. Cara seemed like a lovely lady and a lovely landlord. I don't know why you'd do it.
I never thought you'd say that. And brother from another gutter.
Was she a lovely landlord? I'm not convinced, Suze. I mean, for one, she couldn't put up with the god of hellfire. That's one thing against her. And the second is, she comes down at 11. That's it. So she's upstairs watching the telly or doing whatever, and then comes down at 11 to lock up. What? You're supposed to be the landlady. You're supposed to be pulling the pints. Why is she upstairs?
She's got staff.
Doesn't
She's
make
got staff
any
to do that.
sense at all. Not cut out for the industry. That's my verdict on Cara. So for that reason, I choose to forgive.
So the people's verdict is what we're expecting now. You text 61054, start your message with Simon, do you forgive Robbie, yes or no? Maybe you have a pub or a Halloween or a jukebox-based confession.
Yeah?
Yes, I think you might do.
Yes.
Yes, you
Yeah.
do, don't you? I can see it working. In which case, you send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. But meantime, while we're waiting, the people's verdict. Is Robbie forgiven, yes or no? 61054, first word is Simon. We had a confession just before the news from Robbie. A pub in Stoke which closed because he was messing around on the jukebox. And he had this playing.
I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you...
And so on. Which, if you're a spooked out landlady, then you close it down and you disappear to Ireland, never to return. People's verdict, here it comes.
So everyone's forgiving. Joe, in very windy and rainy Portree on Isle of Skye, says, forgiven, that's the sort of thing I'd do. Just hilarious. He wasn't to know it would be the downfall of the pub. Liam says, forgiven, the number of pubs I've been to that come with some kind of ghost story. Creepy goings-on are to be expected in pubs like that. She should have expected something when she took it on. John, driving home to Devizes, says, forgiven. I agree agree with Matt. Neil from Nottingham says, forgiven. I also agree with Matt. I've run pubs in the past, and you don't come down at 11 o'clock to lock up. You come down at 1:45 and get someone to buy you a pint at last orders.
So it was her fault?
Yes.
Okay, your confession would be welcome. Maybe it's for Halloween, maybe it's just a pub confession, maybe it's a jukebox story. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And of course, as is customary, the David Jacobs drinks trolley
Of
comes
course.
round
Yeah.
as Sister Susie decides which drink she's choosing for today. What's our Thursday drink?
Well, I thought, inspired by Claire and everyone who were on their way home from Bruges, we thought we'd go for a Belgian tipple today. There's a nice bottle of called Oval, which is brewed in a monastery by monks.
Well, they all are, aren't they?
6.2%.
21.5% really. 6.2, but only
It's
have
a nice Belgian pale ale.
just the one.
Just the
I
one.
think, just the one.
Just the one, and sip it, but it's very tasty.
And then walk
Check the
home.
wallpaper.
We used to have it in bottles in the pub. It's delicious.
Marky Mark sends in today's confession. Thank you, Marky Mark. Simon, Matt, Susie and the team, my confession goes back to the late 80s. There's a slight carry-on feel
Okay.
to today's confession.
Okay.
My confession goes back to the late 80s when I was running a bar on the promenade of Douglas in the Isle of Man. It's a busy pub. It's another pub confession is what we got here. They got fairly raucous at times and it became packed at the weekends. We were lucky being on the main pub crawl circuit, so attracted holidaymakers and locals alike. It was housed in an old Victorian hotel, and the layout was a bit of a jigsaw puzzle with random-shaped rooms and tiny corridors. This meant that the ladies' toilets had to be reached by going up an open staircase. This meant that all their comings and goings were in full view of everyone in the main bar as they went up and down the stairs.
Matt's face.
What's an open staircase? Is that like a spiral
I
staircase?
think it's a spiral staircase.
Oh,
yes,
right. Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
I'm appalled
Well, one
at
that's
you.
just not
I'm
in the
appalled at both of you.
One that's not in like a corridor, staircase.
Okay.
One that's
Anyway.
in the middle of a room.
And everyone can see going up and down.
Up and
So
down.
you can look, there goes Cynthia and there goes Gladys.
Up
All
the
that.
spiral staircase.
And back down.
Now, when we started running this pub, we also inherited a cheesy, life-size statue of a naked Greek Adonis figure.
Wow.
We thought the ladies' parlour room would be the perfect place for it to call home. Now, the statue in question had always drawn favourable comments from the regular customers. He was muscly, taut, and in many ways, very impressive. Well,
Dear, oh dear.
word spread, of course, about this saucy attraction, and after a few weeks, many more women seemed to be interested in using the facilities than the men.
Wow.
Let me say there is no statue of any sort in the gents, in
No.
case you were wondering, because that would be cheap and demeaning.
Yeah. Love the 80s.
What raised eyebrows, however, was that some women, on their return to the bar, were cheered and clapped as they descended the stairs. Not all of them by any means, but a good number. This always led to puzzled looks and shrugging. What's going on here? And also, coming down the stairs, just the occasional red face and an appropriate snigger. For some, this remained a total mystery, and I am here, Father Simon, to confess to all of those who remained ignorant of what was happening. This is what was going on. Following some negative comments from a few prudes who objected to the Adonis statue in the toilet, too muscly, too taut, too impressive, it was decided that we needed to cover up his particulars with a large fig leaf. I don't remember how we came up. I said it was quite carry
Yeah,
on.
you did, didn't you? Yeah.
I don't remember how we came up with the idea, but for a bit of fun and with the help of an apprentice electrician who drank in the pub, we put this fig leaf on a hinged switch. And if anyone was interested to find out what was behind the fig leaf, when they lifted it up, it caused a shrill bell in the bar to ring so that everybody could hear.
Well done.
Those in the bathroom had no idea what was going on, but this bell caused great delight for those in the know in the bar whenever a poor, unsuspecting woman, or maybe 20 of them, made the bell ring. Now, if the ladies hung around for long enough, they would have heard the bell ringing themselves and realised what was going on. But to the many who left straight away after just one glass of Chardonnay, utterly baffled by their round of applause and whooping, and would never have known why they were subjected to such random cheering, I am indeed sorry. Father Simon, I'm asking for your forgiveness on behalf of any of the poor women and girls who were caused such embarrassment for merely having a little curiosity about what lay beneath the fig leaf. It's almost biblical, this
Yeah.
story. Thank you very much for your understanding in advance. Yours, Marky Mark. Thank you, Marky Mark, for this tale. Another tale from the pub. Sister Sue, do you have a life-size naked Greek Adonis in your pub?
I don't know. No, I don't think one would actually fit in our toilets. But Marky Mark, I have to applaud you for effort there and ingenuity. Excellent, very funny. However, those poor women, that maybe they were just a little bit curious, and then coming down the stairs and you've embarrassed them, and they don't even know why everyone's looking at them and cheering. And for that reason, I just can't forgive you.
Okay, I can already tell where this is going to go.
Me
brother,
too.
I mean,
brother from another gutter.
Well, for point number one is, how are you fitting a life-size, massive statue inside the loo? Because the loos I've been in, there's never any room. You've got the room for the stalls, you've got the other stuff, and you've got the sinks.
It's an old
That's
Victorian hotel, I think.
Well,
Might have
clearly,
had a big
I mean,
area where the
they
toilets
probably
were.
did have a big area, but that's not the point. And here's the other point, is if you're going to put, it's a bit like having a button that says don't press on it. Everyone's always going to press that button. And if you're going to hinge the fig leaf over the particulars, then someone's always going to lift it.
They are.
And it's just a hostage to fortune. And for that reason, I choose to forgive.
Okay, so it's 1-1. The question is, do you forgive Marky Mark? That is the question. It's the people's verdict on 61054. Start your message with Simon. Anyway, the people's verdict is in like this.
So Jerry says, forgiven. I agree with Matt. Exactly. It's just like Pandora's box. Of course someone's going to lift the fig leaf. It's human curiosity. Hannah in Worcester, I'd have looked. Mary from Aylesbury, forgiven. I haven't laughed so much in ages. Excellent. I'd have definitely lifted the fig leaf.
I did. You're not.
And finally, Vicky in Northampton says, forgiven, if only because that's exactly how I always think of you and Matt. Thank goodness you chose to go into radio. Otherwise, the women of the nation would never get anything done. Let's do it in that voice.
Okay, I just need to check my heart monitor on my new watch. It's just gone up. Your confessions, please. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk.